Welcome to this January 5th edition of the Courier Paperboyz. I'm Doug Newhoff, and I'm joined today by Jim Sullivan, Nick Pateros, and Jim Nelson. Happy New Year, guys. Let's get this thing started. We've got a lot of sports to talk about, as usual, I guess, this time of year. But let's look back at the college bowl games a little bit. You know, there have been some great games, and there have been some clunkers, I guess, so far, which I guess you'd expect when you have 40 games total. So just a few, I guess, stats I drug out. 14 of these games have been decided by 7 points or less. 6 have been decided by a field goal or less. 2 have gone to overtime, so those would be pretty competitive games out of the 40. But then you look on the other hand, 24 of them were decided by double digits. 13 have really been true blowouts that were decided by 20 or more points. 27 teams have scored at least 40 points in their bowl games, and 7 teams have scored 50 or more points. And then I put together a little list of the biggest blowouts. 55-7, Boise State over Northern Illinois. 45-6, Tennessee over Northwestern. 38-0, Alabama over Michigan State. 42-7, San Diego State over Cincinnati. And 41-7, Michigan over Florida. Hawkeye fans can take some solace in that. They didn't make the list of the top 5 biggest blowouts, but that was an interesting game in itself. We'll get to that too. But Big Ten went 5-5. Had some good wins in there with Michigan, Ohio State. Had some bad losses in there, I guess, too. So you guys probably saw your share of these games. What were your favorite games?
The Oregon,
TCU.
TCU game. Yep, there we go.
For
Oregon
sure.
TCU was incredible. TCU would win that game without Boykin. Just speaks to the resiliency of those kids, and you know, that was just a great finish. It seems like the Alamos Bowl has always had some kind of crazy endings, kind of wacky games, and that one sure lived up to that. It was just a spectacular game, and really after a couple nights of blowouts there. So.
Yeah, that was 47-41, triple overtime, and was it the night before the game that Boykin got suspended?
Yeah, I think that's
a
correct.
couple nights
Went out
before,
after
I believe.
curfew,
Yeah.
got into a little scuffle with some police officers allegedly, and so they started a guy named Bram Kohlhausen, I believe, a senior quarterback who's been on the team, I guess, and somehow they turned that around from a 31-0 halftime deficit and win that thing in triple overtime. That was definitely my number one, I guess, on my list of the best bowl games.
Well, considering that I'm biased, I'll go with the exciting quick lane bowl game.
Gophers?
The Gophers winning and improving the record to 6-7. We're all, you know, I was ecstatic. What can I say? 6-7 is really a good year. I think if I'd watched more of it, the West Virginia game played on Saturday night might have been actually at the top of the list. It was a fantastic end of the first half, and went right down to the end. I think it got over like 2 in the morning. I'm not sure what the time it actually was. So that was a great game. There are so many of them now, though, and there are so many different names attached that after you get a day or two past them, it's impossible to remember who did what to whom in a lot of ways.
Right.
And I think it also hurt the overall bowl picture that the last few, the most meaningful ones, were basically blowouts. There was no reason. I turned on about 1 minute the Alabama-Michigan State game, saw the score, and moved on. And you know, we all know, as we're going to discuss the Iowa-Stanford game in a minute, and you know, the other Oklahoma gave it a game, had a game with Clemson for a half, and then that got out of hand. So I think that overall, those last 2 games, most meaningful games, not being as good as we had hoped, really kind of tainted the whole picture for the postseason.
Yeah, 2 big problems for me. I mean, first of all, with 40 bowl games, plus the one coming up Monday, if you count that as a bowl game, there are too many. I kind of long for the old days when you know, New Year's Day was the day that you set your schedule to watch the Rose Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl and the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl and the Sugar Bowl, and that's what you did, and they were good matchups, and they were tied directly to champions from certain conferences, so you always knew who the matchups were going to be, and you could get excited about that. The way that things are now, it's just all over the map, and it's hard to get really focused in and excited about the whole bowl structure. The other thing that I didn't like was putting the 2 national semifinals on a Thursday night on New Year's Eve. Didn't make any sense to me. I mean, those 2 games should have been played on Saturday.
And I think they're finding out that the TV audience is simply not there for games on that night, which makes sense. I mean, people are out, they want to be out and having fun, they don't want to be parked in front of a TV, no matter who's playing. And I think it sounds like, at least initially, there will not be a change. I think they're going to try this at least one more year, and once they find out it doesn't work, maybe they'll change after that. But going back to what you just said, Doug, about the number of bowl games, I've heard the argument made that, okay, so there are a lot of bowl games, it's still an opportunity for the kids to play, and that's what matters. Well, yes, it is, but it's also about money, about giving the cities involved money. It's about, reading the profile of the universities. It's really not about the kids per se, and the kids also run another risk of injury when you play another game like that. So you can say it's about the kids, but it's a lot more complicated than that, and from a viewing, spectator, consumer standpoint, it's not good. There are just too many.
It amazes me how some of these organizations are able to sponsor a bowl game. I mean, you're talking about multi-millions of dollars in sponsorship. Quick Lanes, what kind of an organization is that to come up with that kind of money? There was another bowl that was sponsored by an organization that promotes like CrossFit obstacle course races. It's amazing that.
Who's sponsoring the Independence Bowl these days? I don't remember, but of course, that was one of the great all-time with the Pool and Weed Eater Independence Bowl, which
sure.
is sort of a negative incentive if you ask me to watch a game.
A year ago, I think it was Duck Commander, but they
Yes,
stepped out.
the Ducks ducked out of their commitment, so they're gone.
Duck call sales must have been down a
I
little
would
bit
guess
this
so.
year, yeah. Nellie, you went out to the Rose Bowl, mostly as a fan. Share a little bit of that experience with us.
It was incredible. I mean, it's one of those bucket lists. You want to see the Rose Bowl. Even if there wasn't a game there, I think it was worth walking around the stadium. But, I mean, it's an incredible setting with the San Gabriel Mountains behind there, and then when the sun set, and the setting was incredible. There was Iowa and Hawkeye fans everywhere. Everywhere you went. They had a thing at the USS Iowa. I was going to go to it, and then like 20,000 people showed up there, and I decided not to go to it. And I just went to Hollywood, where it was packed with like 20,000 other Iowa fans. Every turn. I mean, that stadium. Well, the interesting inside part, a lot of the seats were red, so it looked like there's more Stanford fans there, but Iowa dwarfed them. And of course, the way Stanford played, you didn't hear much from the Iowa fans. But it was a fun atmosphere to walk around all those people, and they had the big ones. They got I'm not sure if they had a few drinks or what, but they got Time Warner on there right before halftime, and he was chanting, "We got him right where we want him," and it was 35-0. So, and then I think Ashton Kutcher was there, so the Iowa boys and the big Iowa Hollywood stars that were Iowa fans were there, and it really, I mean, and outside the stadium, the pageantry of it all was really neat to watch that. And we went up and saw the parade. I walked up where you parked at the Rose Bowl, and you had about a 1.5 mile walk, and you go to the parade, and that was neat. We got there just in time as Herky went by and then the Iowa band, so it was perfect timing for us. But I mean, it was incredible. The game was not much to remember, but just to be there and to walk around and interact with the fans, that was real neat.
Yeah, speaking of the game, 5-16, I think it ended up. They got away from Iowa so fast, and the biggest takeaway, I think, for not just me, but probably a lot of Hawkeye fans, is just how good Christian McCaffrey really is. They got him out into space, and his feet are so good, and he changes tempo. He reminded me a little bit of Walter Payton and a little bit of Barry Sanders, and I just can't think of another back I've seen in a long time that brings that combination of skills and elusiveness to the game.
The first play really said it all. Jordan Lomax is probably still looking for his shoulder pads and helmet out there after getting addressed by Mr. McCaffrey on the first play. And it only got, depending on how you want to look at it, better for McCaffrey and worse for the Hawkeyes after that. And think that he had a touchdown call back by a penalty. Otherwise, his numbers really would have been off the charts. And Doug, you saw the Rose Bowl after the 1985 season when UCLA won handily and had a running back named Ball who was pretty good. I saw it 5 years after that, their last previous trip to the Rose Bowl, when Mark Brunell was fantastic. But McCaffrey, and I realize memory is kind of an iffy thing, it's a selective process, but he's as good as either one of those two, and maybe a lot better in terms of versatility and what he can bring to the field. He was just tremendous, just tremendous.
It's amazing that you know what you're up against when you watch the film and you read all the clips and the headlines and all the papers, the stories and so forth, and you still can't stop it. I mean, when he got out in the open field, you're talking about what he did to Lomax. Well, he did that to half a dozen guys
Josie Jewell on the punt return.
in the course of that game, and they had him lined up, they had him in their sights, and they would totally whiff. I mean, his feet were that good.
It was incredible. There's the one game I wish I was at home where I could rewind it on my DVR and watch over. Because you get one, if you're not paying attention, you miss the replay on the screen there at the game. I thought the one telltale game or two, and I don't know if this changed the outcome of the game, but it's 14-0, Iowa's driving, and Tavon Smith, they had a short, second and short, I think, and Tavon Smith breaks open on a slant over the middle, and CJ never looked his way. He locked in on Matt Vandenberg, and everybody knows what happened, and it was pick six. I don't know if that changed the outcome of Iowa scores there. Maybe it slows the stem a little bit, gets the Iowa crowd in there, but that was the big thing. But yeah, Christian McCaffrey, he's just a sophomore. You wonder if he's going to play another year and then come out or what. But
I agree with you. I think that pick six really changed the game. Iowa could weather those first two touchdowns.
Yeah.
You can say, okay, now we're getting a little feel for the speed of the game and what this guy can do and what we need to do to stop him. But then you throw the pick six, and then you just start to think, well, what else can go wrong?
yeah.
With Iowa, their formula this season's been their defense and then getting good play behind their offensive line, and they didn't have either one of those in that Rose Bowl game, and I think that really hurt them.
I mean, they adjusted well. In the second half, how hard Stanford got to go. I'm not saying they won the second half, but I thought the defense played better in the second half. With McCaffrey still had his moments, but,
Well, I think that's the one untold story of the Rose Bowl, was that as well as Stanford played, Iowa helped them out in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
They didn't play well. I mean, and you could say that it wouldn't have mattered. I think it would have been certainly a lot closer, a lot more competitive, had Iowa executed better, made better decisions, had maybe the line blocked a little bit better. I mean, again, it's a two-way street. Stanford contributed to some of Iowa's problems, but Iowa certainly did not help itself in any phase of that game.
I think one of my favorite parts was I was sitting down in my seat, and stealth fighter flew over and I missed it, but maybe that's why they call it the stealth. But you heard it, but I didn't see it. It was a flyby right at the start of the game. So, but anyway, in that first play, I was like, whoa, Iowa might be in trouble. That was a David Johnson special. I think you and I torched Iowa with that play about 3 or 4 times
something
a couple
close
years
to it,
ago. Yeah.
Yep, that was a favorite of you and I's with Johnson for sure. Anything else about the Hawkeyes? A good season. They've got a lot to look forward to. A lot of kids coming back. They just need to add a couple players, and they should be right back in a pretty competitive position. And obviously, their schedule gets a lot tougher next year. They had Ohio State and Michigan, or
Michigan and Penn State, I believe,
So
They get Desmond King back, and they're going to hear back about Drew Ott. If they get Drew Ott back for a 6th year, now you got an all Big Ten, first-team caliber defensive end coming back. If he gets that 6th year, and he can stay healthy. I mean, he had the elbow this year and then the ACL. So if he gets that,
Jewel, that'd be some nice pieces.
yeah, Jewel, his leap he took from freshman year to sophomore year, and then Ben Neiman had a big year too, and he got that was another key to the Iowa's defense. He got hurt like in the first 3 or 4 plays of that game, and I don't think he came back. So they had to go with Bo Bauer, and no knock against Bo Bauer, but I think Ben Neiman was a big part of that defense.
Yeah, they've got a group of offensive linemen. Because of injuries, they played a lot of guys this year, and a lot of guys got quality experience, so they'll have a good group coming back there that'll help fill in the gaps for the guys that they
And I like
lose.
Wadley a lot, too, as a running back.
Wadley had some moments.
And that was another thing in the Rose Bowl. We didn't talk about Ike Bucker, I guess, wasn't healthy enough to really give a big push. Boone Myers was hurt, I think, was not full speed. I mean, they switched the whole thing. James Daniels started at left tackle after, being like a backup at guard, or right tackle. I'm trying to think of where it was, but, so they were banged up because Stanford absolutely dominated them up front.
Yeah, Beathard didn't have any time as that game started going on.
Yeah.
Not really a big surprise that Desmond King is coming back, at least in my eyes. I mean, he's an awfully good player, but to give up your final year to go be a late, probably first-round NFL draft pick, I don't know if that's the right decision. So I'm glad he's coming back, and I think it's a good call. Let's talk a little bit about the national championship matchup. You can make the case that maybe Stanford or Ohio State should have been in that mix to begin with, in hindsight, the way Iowa and Michigan State got drilled. But it is what it is, and Clemson and Alabama looked awfully good. What do you guys think about this matchup Monday night?
I like Clemson, and I may be going against the grain here a little bit because Alabama's about, I think, 5 to 7 point favorite, somewhere in there. Primarily because of the quarterback. I think he's the sort of quarterback that gives Alabama problems. He can beat you in a number of different ways, and I think Clemson showed against Oklahoma can play defense at least well enough to give itself a chance to win. So based on that matchup alone, I'm going with the Tigers.
They're supposed to get their big defensive end back as well, who got hurt in that semifinal game, so that should help their defense.
Alabama and that defensive line is just incredible. I mean, I've never seen a defensive line, I mean, they control the game. I was worried if Iowa had actually won that Big Ten game and how bad it would have been Iowa trying to run the ball against that defense. I thought about that. Iowa trying to run against that defensive line, it would have been. But I like Alabama, that defensive line, I think, but it's going to be interesting. Clemson, I think, is one of the more explosive offensive teams, so we'll see that it's going to test them in that court. You're like, Red, Watson is going to be giving them a real test.
Watson's a handful. He's very elusive and multidimensional. Got a little hometown flavor with Crimson Tide, with Ross Piersbacher starting guard for them. Kind of watched him as much as I could in the semifinal game, and it seemed like he held his own quite well. And an interesting storyline that I heard on one of the sports talk radio programs, Dabo Sweeney apparently began his playing career at Alabama at some point, and as a walk-on or something like that, so he's got a little history with the Alabama program too. We got another national championship game coming up Saturday. North Dakota State plays Jacksonville State. I have to confess, I don't know a lot about Jacksonville State, except that they put up a lot of points and they apparently run the ball really well. Anybody know any more about this game or have a kind of a feel for what we should expect? Can North Dakota State make it 5 in a row?
I would think they could. I'm like you, I don't know a whole lot about Jackson State, perhaps even less than you know. But I do know what North Dakota State always brings to this sort of game. It's resilience, toughness, a physical presence. I think Jacksonville State will be tested in the offensive line. We'll find out how well they run the ball against that NDSU front seven. They have a dilemma at quarterback, if you want to call it that. Carson Wentz, I believe now, is healthy. The guy that's been starting has done very well. So just based on experience alone, based on what North Dakota State tends to bring to this sort of game, I like the Bison.
You know, well, Jacksonville State, very good. They come out of the same conference that Eastern Illinois is in. I think they won, is that Ohio Valley?
Right.
It wasn't a super deep league, but they had 2 playoff teams, I believe. And they've already fired the first 2 shots, or at least the media down there said that the reign is over and that Jacksonville State's going to win. The guy their beat writer wrote a column, said that this team, North Dakota State, their run is over. And I think a TV station's jumped the board on there. So Jacksonville State, they're riding high. They're number 1, but they run the ball. I think they've rushed for over 3,000 yards or some ungodly number.
Yeah, I can't imagine they've seen as good of a rush defense as they're going to see against North Dakota State. That might be a little bit of a reality check for them there.
And then they got to deal with North Dakota State going on those long, grinding 15, 16 play drives that just chew up 6, 7, 8 minutes. Next thing you know, you're in the 4th quarter and you're playing defense for 40 minutes.
I think, yeah, until somebody goes into a national title game and beats North Dakota State, they have to be the favorites. It's just that they have too big of a track record for success out there.
You know, I almost hope North Dakota State wins just so we don't have to deal with a Bison team next year that has a chip on their shoulder. Let's talk a little UNI basketball. I feel like I'm kind of waiting for this Panther men's team to find some traction. It's been one step forward, then half a step backward, at least in the win column. Sully, you watch these guys on a regular basis. Are they still trying to figure out kind of who they are?
I guess, although the way I look at it is I think they know who they are, they just don't necessarily want to admit it. They're a perimeter-oriented team for the most part. When when Jesperson and Bohannon are shooting well, their chances to go up. When Washburn can get to the hole or has his mid-range game working, they're a much, much tougher team to beat. They have a little bit of an inside presence with Clint Carlson, occasionally with Bennett Cook, but it's not there consistently. They don't have depth to speak of. They go maybe 7 deep, although Ted Freeman's minutes have not been significant of late. Defensively, I think they're okay. Jeremy Morgan's pretty good. He has to stay on the floor, and that didn't happen at Southern Illinois.
Yeah.
But again, that's another place where they don't have much of an inside presence. Rebounding, I agree with Ben Jacobson. They took a step forward against Southern Illinois, rebounded much better, but still it's a work in progress. They have to prove over a period of games they can rebound. So we do have some general outlines of what they are. The question is how much better can they get in these certain areas where they've struggled a little bit. Can they overcome when one of the big 3 seniors isn't performing well? Can they get another guy inside to help with the Knicks offensively on a consistent basis? And we use the word a lot, and maybe it gets tiresome, but consistency is a big key for any basketball team. It really, really is for this crew because they don't have much of a margin for error. They have to find something game after game after game. to sustain them. Ben Jacobson thinks it's defensive rebounding, and he's probably right.
Yeah, the other thing on offense, I mean, last year when you had Washburn and Deion Mitchell, you had two guys who could beat you with the dribble, could break you down and take the ball to the basket. And, you know, Bohannon's tried to do that a little bit, but he's just not Deion Mitchell when it comes to, you know, his quickness and his speed. And so I think it has been easier for other teams to defend that part of the UNI's game a little bit. And they have to make shots, and they just, you know, that comes and goes.
Yeah, I think, my opinion, I would like to see a little bit more of Wyatt Lohaus in an off-guard role. He gave them a really nice spark in the first half against Southern Illinois, and he's not a guy that's going to beat the opposition by himself. That said, he can give you points along the baseline. He can hit a three now and then, so that could potentially just give you that other threat to go along with the big three. Jeremy Morgan at times has been a really good offensive player, but they haven't really figured out when to go to him, if that makes any sense. I think they know what Jesperson, Washburn, and Bohannon can do, but they haven't quite figured out at what time to bring Morgan into the mix a little bit more, and I think we'll see a little bit more of that as the season goes along as well.
I like the way Clint Carlson's playing. I mean, he gives them a lot of energy, a lot of toughness. And Cook, you know, I was about ready to put him on the bench next to Coach Jacobson, but he really stood up in the Bradley game at least and played really, I mean, he was good, and he was aggressive, and he really got after it, so hopefully we'll see more of that.
He actually started off well in the Southern Illinois game too, but apparently he bumped into Jesperson literally nose versus head,
Yeah.
and Cook's nose lost, and he was not quite as effective after that. He did play, but lost a little bit of his effectiveness. But he's certainly shown at times he can play, and actually on a couple different occasions so is Ted Friedman. It just hasn't been there all the time, and that's another situation where Jake has to figure out, and I don't know how you do this, has to figure out in any given night what he's going to get from these guys.
I still think they'll be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the league, you know, probably looking at 12-6 maybe in the Valley, hopefully a little better than that, we'll see. Nick, it's kind of been a similar story for the Panther women. You know, for one, I'm tired of hearing about what a great shooting team this is. The stats just don't back it up. I don't care how many baskets you make in practice. What counts is what happens on game night. And they're shooting about, 36% overall and 29% from three-point range. And they only have like 1 or 2 kids that's shooting better than 40%.
Yeah.
So something needs to change for
Yeah.
the Panther women.
They've shown they're a good defensive team, but they have to hold a team under 65 points to have a chance at winning right now. You look at their team, the way it's structured, you only have 2 or 3 kids on the court that are threats to score. I think a lot of it is that these kids coming back from injuries haven't shot at very high percentages. Keitel was shooting above 50% from the field 2 years ago. This year she's in the 40s. She's had some big games, but then she's disappeared in other games. And then Hannah Schoenhardt, I think, is under maybe 20% now, and she was a kid that was shooting above 40% before her injury. You haven't gotten anything percentage-wise out of the Davison sisters. Charnay Lamar's never been a good shooter, but she's a valuable passer, defender. Her role isn't to score, but yeah, they need to find somebody that can come in off the bench or come in and give them, you know, an 8-point, 10-point scoring output and shoot a 40% from the field, and that would be progress right now for this offense, because right now you've got Madison Weekly and then Amber Sorensen will just sit out there and bomb three-pointers, and even if she makes 30% of those, she shoots enough of those to get over 10 points a game or whatever. So they just have to have some kids step up and hit some shots. But again, I think the Valley's not a very deep league on the women's side. There's probably 4 teams that are in the mix, and UNI is good enough defensively that they should still be able to contend for a title, I think.
That was the point I was going to make. I don't think it's a real strong league, and it's not a very big jump from where UNI is to where they need to be a contender in that league. And so there's a lot of things to look forward to for them if they just figure a few things out and make a few more shots.
They played a very good Southern Illinois team over the weekend, and that was a 5-point game, and they didn't play well in that game. So I think there's reason to believe that they could still be in the mix.
Let's talk a little NFL playoffs before we wrap this up. Got the wild card games this weekend. Kansas City at Houston. I kind of like the Chiefs in that game. Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. I got to go with the old Steelers. And Sunday we've got Seattle at the Vikings. Sorry, Vikings fans, but I think the Seahawks are playing really well right now. And I'm not sold on the Vikings completely. They're pretty good. They're a lot better, but I'm not sure they're ready to beat somebody with the playoff resume that Seattle has. And then we got the Packers at the Redskins. The Packers just aren't very good right now. They still have Aaron Rodgers, so I'm kind of leaning toward the Packers to beat the Redskins on Sunday. What do you guys think?
The Redskins are sort of a sneaky team, I think, because they were totally off the radar when the season began. No one had any confidence in Kirk Cousins, and he's played very, very well, and I think they have a real legitimate chance to advance out of this. I think everything you say about the Packers is true. Rodgers has to carry that team, but he can't carry it when he's flat on his back after being sacked a number of times. Eddie Lacy's in and out. The receivers don't get consistently open. The defense is so-so at best. So if they win this, I think that it's kind of a remarkable testament to some of the coaching that McCarthy does, and we'll see where they go. The Vikings, my team, as many of us remember, got nipped by the Seahawks back in early December, and it could very well happen again because Russell Wilson is playing in an incredible level of football right now. The only hope I think Minnesota has is if the Seahawks team that showed up in maybe Week 16 against the Rams and seemed disinterested and bored and lost, if that team shows up, the Vikes have a chance. Otherwise, not so much. The Chiefs are a fascinating story because they've won, 11 in a row, 10 in a row?
10 in a row, yeah.
Started 1-5 or something like that.
Jamal Charles went down early.
Yeah, and Alex Smith is a quarterback absolutely no one wants to give any credit to, but he's kept the ship afloat there. And we have A.J. McCarron running the show at Cincinnati.
I think I read today that Dalton got the cast off this.
Is he gonna come back?
Yeah, so that doesn't mean he's gonna play, but yeah.
Which is fine because his playoff record is terrible. So now you're looking at a choice between a quarterback who's unproven in the playoffs to one that hasn't performed in the playoffs. Against the Steelers, I'll take Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's hard to take the Bengals in the playoffs with that track record. It seems like that's a yearly deal. I like the way Seattle's playing right now, and they're going to have Marshawn Lynch back, I've heard, for that game. So I think that'll be one of the more interesting wild card games is that Seattle game at Minnesota.
Yep, should be some good football this weekend. At least a couple of those games are pretty intriguing. And last, I think I want to give a shout out to Tim Doring over at Waterloo Christian. Set the all-time school scoring record last night, and did it in typical Tim Doring style, 45 points. And Nellie, you were there, so you can tell me the rest of his stat line, but it was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, 45 points, 16 boards, which I think was close to accurate. You know, sometimes they get one or two more with the hometown cooking. 8 assists, I think, was right around. He had five steals and 2 block shots, and I think it was right. It was incredible. I mean, without him, I think their coach said it afterwards, he's very important to us, and that might be the understatement of the year. Of course, though, the year is only 5 days old right now, but incredible, great player. You know, the kid that, and when postseason comes around, we got to push to, to get some honors. He can. A big family, comes from a family of 9 kids, and he got beat up by his older brothers a lot growing up, and I think that's molded him because he scored a lot of things on great drives, and he somehow found a way to fling it up there and score, and he does everything for the Regents, and it was an impressive game. When they really took over that game, it wasn't him scoring, it was him dishing the ball and then scoring. And I think there was 3 or 4 possessions in a row when they went from a 2-point game to them leading by double digits, where you had assist on every point they scored. So.
Yep, congrats to Tim, and that's a good story. And ironically, one of the other guys who was beating him up when he was young was his neighbor Josh Tink, whose record he ends up beating. So, good story, good stuff. All right, we need to wrap it up. That's it for today. You can keep up with all the sports action in our print editions and at WCFcourier.com. And we'll be back next week.